Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another interesting episode on your favorite Little Slaw YouTube channel. So today in this video, we are going to see about what is a web server, and we'll also see how does an Apache web server works in terms of a web server. So Apache web server is one of the top used tool in the market today, and we're going to see step by step on how the Apache works, the Apache HTTP server works. And the reason I'm discussing this question here is there was an interview for one of our subscriber, and he has got this question, and the question was like, "What is a web server, and what was the latest version of web server you have used?" So we are going to discuss that in this video. Basically, I'm going to start with what is a web server, and that will help you to understand what a web server is and how does it work. So starting with the very first point, that is what is a web server. So we all know a web server is a software or a hardware that serves over the internet. And when I say it serves over the internet, it typically sends the response to a user's request through a web browser. So whenever we send a request to the web browser, it sends back the response to the to the user via the web browser, and it's again a software or as hardware. So when we type a URL, or when we click a link, or when we send a request to the server via the browser, what happens is the request which is sent to the server retrieves the relevant files from the server. It can be HTML file, or it can be a CSS file, or it can be an image, and sends that particular information, or sends that particular response back to our browser to display. So that is what a web browser in basic. So in a high level, that's how the web server works. So whenever we send a request, it gets the request, it processes it, and then sends it back to us in terms of HTML or CSS or an image or the information or the proper response which we are supposed to get it via the browser. So next, we'll see what are the key functions of the web server, and from then on we'll see why is a web server required and what are the examples of web server and how does the Apache HTTP server works. So now let's move on to the next part, which is the key functions of the web server. So now we'll start with the key features. So let's see the key functions of the web server. And the first one is handling the client request. And let me bring it. Yep. So we have all these functions, which is the first out of which the first one is the handling of the client request. So as we all know, a web server listens for the incoming requests from the client. So usually the web browser, and after so once it listens, or once it gets the request, it processes these requests and it operates over the hyper text transfer protocol, the HTTP or HTTPS for security purposes to communicate with the clients. So how it works? So how does the handling of the client request works? So when a user enters a URL in the browser sends an HTTP request to the web server. So the request includes details like what method is that? Is that a get method? Is that a post method? And also it attaches the headers, and it also attaches the potential a body data for the post request or even for the get request as well. So for example, when a user types http.google.com in their browser, so the browser sends a get request to that web server, which we know. Let me show you quickly. Uh, so yeah, this is how it works. So I'm sending a request to google.com, and here you can see the request method and the request URL and the status code. So this, sorry, not the status code, but just see the method and the URL. So the browser sends a get request to the web server, and that might look like this one, that get request and then the URL. So the web server processes this request, like whatever the request I have sent to the browser, and it determines that it needs to return the content of the Google, the website, the page that we have sent. So what happens is the second part, which is delivering the content. So the delivering content is the second part. So once a web server processes the request, it it retrieves the requested content. Like for example, when I say in this example, the google.com, right? And like the HTML file. So if you see on the right side, you can see we have got PNG images. You can see multiple PNG images, and then the other files here, mostly the PNG files here, and then you can see several other supporting files. So the web server, what it does is actually it fetches the required files from its storage account, storage that is, which I mean is the document root, and also it prepares a HTTP response which contains all these content. So it collects all these content. So for example, after processing the HTTP request for this Google website, the Google page, the web server locates the corresponding HTML file. That is the first one which you see here, the google.com file. So it sends a response to the browser, including the content. So here you can see the content of it, which is in the response. So this is actually the response of this file. So this is what the web server does. So it sends back the response to the browser, including the content of the file, including the content of the google.com file. And the next thing is it serves, I mean, the web server serves both the static and dynamic content. So when I say static or dynamic content, so web server can serve both static and dynamic content. So static content is fixed and it does not change unless it is modified manually. So when I say modified manually, so imagine a HTML page. So until you don't change it, whatever the content in the HTML page will be there all the time. It won't be changed. And when it comes to dynamic content, it is generated on the fly based on the user's interaction or data from the databases. Because when you, for example, the same example here. So when I'm searching for like little slaw, or let me just enter it here. So these one which you can see here is the HTML page. So that's the reason every time when you come here, you always see the same thing. But on the other hand, when you are typing google.com and you want to search for different content, um, they will be served. I mean, the server will execute scripts like PHP, Python, or Ruby that generate the content based on your input or any other variables. And on the other hand, for example, the Little's Law website that I've created will show the files like the HTML files, the links which I have added, and they are like directly from the file system. So that's the difference between the static and dynamic. The static won't change, but the dynamic will change every time when you're changing your input or when you're changing your request. And coming back to the next thing is, so usually a request to this page, the littlesacademy.github.io.learning.html, will retrieve all these content which you see here, and then which is basically from the service file system. When I say service file system, it is from the github.io file system. But on the other hand, when I say websites like google.com, so a user, you give an input in the google.com website. So the web server processes the data from it by using the script which is inbuilt in the Google by the Google, and then it interacts with the databases and generates a response based on the input. And moving on to the fourth part, which is the security and access control. So when I say security and access control, the web servers implement security measures to protect the resources from unauthorized access. And this includes encryption, authentication, and authorization protocols. So how it works? How does the encryption work? So when I say encryption, we all know about the HTTPS, which is the secure connection that uses the SSL or TLS protocols to encrypt the data transmitted between the client and the server, protecting the sensitive information. So whenever we send a request from the client to the server machines, this HTTPS take care of the protection of the sensitive information, because somebody could uh, inject their command or anything else to get whatever information we are sending it, and then from the server back to the client. And then when it comes to authentication, so the web servers can require users to log in with the credentials to access certain resources. And then when it comes to authorization, so after logging in, the server checks the user permissions to determine what resources the users can access. And when it comes to an example, so when a user attempts to access a secure area of a website, for example, the user details, the user login or the user administration details. So the server redirects them to login page, and after entering valid credentials, the server uses session management to ensure that only authenticated users can access protected resources. And now the last part, which is the load balancing and traffic management. So when it comes to load balancing and traffic management, so the when we all know the websites nowadays has a good reach in terms of learning content and for gaining more knowledge. So for websites with high traffic, web servers can distribute incoming requests across multiple servers to ensure optimal performance and prevent any single server from being overloaded. So how it works? So load balancers sit between the clients and a group of web servers, directing the request to the least busy server based on current traffic or other factors. For example, during a major event, like for example the Amazon Great Indian Festival, so multiple users access the Amazon.in website, and the load balancer distributes the incoming request among several web servers. So that's what the load balancer does. So server A might handle 40% of requests, and server B 35%, and the server C might handle 25% of the load. So this is to ensure that no single server is overwhelmed, which provides a smoother experience of users. So now we'll move on to the next topic. So now we will see why a web server is required for an application. So the first reason of it is the user access. So when I say user access, a web server enables the users to access the websites and web applications from anywhere in the world using the web browser. So that's the reason I told you uh, that we need web server for the user access. So without a web server, users, that is we, could not have a centralized location from which to retrieve the application resources. And when I say we cannot retrieve from the centralized locations, the first thing is the global accessibility. So by hosting applications on a web server, the users, that is we, can connect to the server over the internet using the URL. So that's the only way to connect to the web server. So this means that as long as users have internet access and a web browser, they can access the application regardless of their physical locations. It can be anywhere in the world. Say, for example, anybody like myself, I can access irctc.co.in from UK and they can book a ticket for me. Or people from India can book uh, a tour bus, which is in London, so they can book from anywhere from the world, and they can access the application regardless of the physical location. So that's the global accessibility, and that comes as part of the user access. And then when it comes to the cross platform compatibility, so the web servers allow applications to be accessed across different operating systems and devices. So people can nowadays access the application using desktops, tablets, smartphones, and this cross-platform because everywhere you see the screen sizes changes and the browser changes, and uh, the operating system, like it can be a Windows, it can be Linux, it can be Mac OS, whatever it can be. So but we are still able to access it. So this cross platform compatibility is achieved through standard protocols like HTTP and HTML, which ensures that the application looks and functions consistently across various devices. For example, like you have a web-based project management tool like Trello, and users can access Trello through their web browsers by navigating it to their website. So the web server processes requests from users, allowing them to create, update, and manage projects from anywhere in the world, whether they are at home or in the office or in the go. And then the second part is the centralized hosting. So when I say centralized, so previously it is globally accessed, and now when I say centralized hosting, so the web server provides centralized hosting for applications, which means that all users access the same version of the application without needing to install it on their devices. Say, for example, if I want to install Google, I don't want to install an application. Rather, I can use my browser. I can even use the same browser for any other applications, right? I can access Amazon, I can access Pizza Hut, I can access Tesco, I can access Aldi, I can access Lidl. So I can access any application without needing to install it on my device, right? Until otherwise I want to create an app, I can do all this in my browser. So when I say I can do all these, this comes as a part of a single source of truth. So with a centralized hosting model, the web server holds all the necessary files, the databases, and the resources for the application, and this ensures that all users access the most recent version of the application without the hassle or updates or installations. And when it comes to simplified maintenance, so when updates or changes are needed, for example, like bug fixes or feature enhancements or security patches, so developers can make those changes on the server, and all the users will automatically benefit from the updates the next time they access the application. And this maintenance part significantly reduces the complexity of managing multiple versions of an application across different user devices. So, for example, an online platform, like for example, we all know about the Khan Academy, which relies on centralized hosting. So, all education materials, their quizzes, and the progress tracking are stored on the web server, and users simply log in to access their courses and any updates on the curriculum which are applied on the server side, and there is no need for students to download or install anything. And then when it comes to security, so web server plays a crucial role in managing the security protocols, which ensures that data transmitted between the clients and servers is secure and protected from unauthorized access. And out of which the first part is the data encryption. So web server often implements SSL TLS protocols to encrypt data transmitted between the client and the server. And this encryption, when I say the data encryption, they protects the sensitive information such as passwords, because we all know we all enter passwords for all the applications, and the credit card numbers. Yeah, for to book anything, we believe the web browser will not lose our data, or somebody could hack our browser and get the credit card number. So we all enter that, the passwords, the credit card numbers, and the personal details from being intercepted by malicious actors. And then the next thing is the authentication and the authorization. So web service manages user authentication processes, which ensures that only the authorized users can access certain resources. And this is achieved through mechanisms like username or password authentication and two-factor authentication and OAuth protocols. So once users are authenticated, the web servers also enforce authorization rules, determining what actions users are permitted to perform within the application. And then when it comes to regularly updating the security. So web servers can be configured to receive regular security updates, which helps to patch the vulnerabilities and protect against emerging threats. And administrators can monitor server security logs and set up firewalls to prevent unauthorized access. And to give you a quick example on this security part, so for example, you have website like Amazon. So when a customer enters the credit card information for purchase, the web server uses HTTPS to encrypt the transaction data, and this ensures that sensitive financial information is securely transmitted, which is protected from any potential threats such as eavesdropping or data breaches. And now, to come to an end, we'll see how does the Apache works. So I'll show you the real time example. So before we end this video, we'll see how does the Apache HTTP server works. The Apache HTTP server is one of the most popular web servers in use today, and it is known for its flexibility and its extensive features and strong community support. So the first thing is, like, we'll see how does the Apache works. So the first part of it is the user action. So a user opens their web browser and types in the URL. For example, it can be google.com. So after we type the google.com in the web browser, what happens is the second step is the DNS resolution. So the browser sends a request to the domain name system, and in fact, we have discussed about what a domain name system is in our one of our videos. So you can check that out, and it sends a request to the domain name, the DNS server, in short, to translate the domain name, that is google.com, into an IP address. For instance, it might resolve to an IP. It can be anything like 192.0.2.1, and after that is resolved, it goes to it sends a HTTP request. So the browser then sends an HTTP GET request to the web server, which is located at the resolved IP address, which I have told you earlier. It can be 192.0.2.1. So the request looks like I have told you. I have already showed you the GET request, and then it can be via HTTPS, and the host is www.google.com. And once it is sent, it is then received. So the Apache web server, if Google has hosted Apache web server, then the Apache web server receives the request, and it processes the request by checking the requested URL against its configuration and the document root. So when I say document root, which is the directory where the website files are stored. And once it is received, what else? What next? So once we send the request and once it is received at the server end, it then processes the request. So the Apache web server identifies the request is for the home page of the website. So it looks for the index.html file in its document root directory, which looks like it can be var www/html slash index.html. So it can be something like that. It's just an example. So it processes the request and then it sends back the response. So once Apache finds the file, it reads the contents of index.html and it prepares an HTTP or HTTPS response and sends it back to the browser. And the response will look like whatever we have asked. Like, for example, if google.com, it can be Google and then a place for the search box, right? That's the response which we actually wanted to see when we are hitting the google.com and then rendering the page. When I say rendering the page, the browser receives the response and renders the HTML content, which displays the home page of google.com to the user. And after we have rendered the page, the page or the web server will still load additional resources. So when I say additional resources, the HTML file contains links to additional resources like CSS files, JavaScript files, or any images. The browser will make additional HTTP requests to the web server for each resource. For example, if index.html references a CSS file, and at style.css, the browser sends another request, and that's what I showed you when I was showing the google.com. So it was having lots and lots of supporting files like png files and everything. And finally, it handles additional requests. So Apache, the web server, processes these additional requests in the same manner, serving each file back to the browser, allowing it to fully render the web page. So until the page is fully rendered, it won't wait. It'll keep on sending additional requests. So overall, in summary, Apache listens for incoming HTTP requests on a specified port. Usually, it can be 80 for HTTP and 443 for HTTPS, and it delivers static and dynamic content. So it can serve files directly, or it can invoke server-side scripts for dynamic content generation. And then when it comes to managing multiple connections, Apache can handle multiple user requests simultaneously, allowing many users to access the website at the same time. So overall, in this example, we saw Apache acts as the intermediary between the user's browser and the web application or website, and it retrieves and serves the requested content, which makes it possible for users as like us to interact with the web application seamlessly. And this process is a fundamental to how web servers functions in delivering content over the internet. So with that, I come to an end of this video, and I believe this video will be very useful to you. So until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shanmugam, your favorite Little Sly YouTube channel. Take care and bye bye, and all the very best for your interview.